各位觀眾大家好，歡迎收睇26分鐘見證實錄。卑詩省嘅內陸小鎮Lytton過去曾經係華工築鐵路、淘金同拓荒嘅根據地，亦都建立咗一個屬於當地嘅華人社區。但係喺2021年發生嘅林火，一夕之間就燒毀咗整個小鎮，亦都摧毀咗一座見證住華人足跡嘅歷史博物館。適逢5月係亞裔傳統文化月，我哋喺今集嘅節目就會同大家走入去災後重建嘅Lytton，去了解呢一座小鎮同博物館嘅歷史同埋現況。
I'm Lorna Fandridge. I'm the executive director of the Lytton Chinese History Museum. I'm also the sole proprietor, so the owner of the building and of the collection. So I've been living in Lytton for over 45 years, I guess now. I was just involved with initially my husband's business, which is Kamshin Rafting Resort. And so I worked there for many, many years. While we were in the process of locating our rafts downtown in Lytton, we were told that there was a Chinese temple on one of the lots that we'd purchased. So that was the beginning of this interest in the Chinese heritage of Lytton. At that time, nobody seemed to even know in Lytton that there was a Chinese temple here. It's recorded on 1912 maps and many other places, but people in Lytton from modern times didn't know about it at all. So many years went by, and then I thought perhaps I could be the person that brings that history forward. That's where this began. And so because I was pretty much at retirement age, I just decided, why don't I build a building, and why don't I tell that story? They're on maps done by the railway in 1912. They clearly showed on this lot that they called it the Chinese Joss House. So it clearly was in this spot. So this is the building here, and then this is the building again in 1912. So the town has grown quite a bit by then. And this is the size of the building that we took those dimensions to actually build this. So the museum part of this building is exactly same size as that building was. But I think during the gold rush, there were many people, a lot came from California, Chinese people, and they realized that there may be money made in the trades as well as in gold. So at that time, they did start the general store. And then there was a laundry, there were a couple of restaurants. There were companies that did transporting goods to Barkerville. I think in the early census it shows 30 Chinese businesses in this little town. So that continued until, it started to peter out a bit, but then in 1882, 83 is when the railway, CPR, came to this town. So then there were many workers here doing this stretch from here to Spence's Bridge, Chinese workers. Times were difficult for them, of course, but I mean, that was a huge change for the province, having them build a railway. The grocery store that was at this end was torn down in 1972 before I arrived here, because it had been an abandoned building for a long time. So they eventually just took them down. Eventually, I'm hoping to find more pictures. I know the family that tore it down, I'm hoping they might have one. In Lytton itself, after that, it just sort of dwindled. I think by the 1912 or 14 census, there were only 30-some people, Chinese people, in the town of Lytton. However, they didn't count anybody that were in the farms around here working in the fields. And for example, the Chong family in 1924, they were bringing in Chinese workers, leasing land from a local farmer and growing vegetables. And we had a receipt before the fire that said they sold 94 tons of seed potatoes to a store on Pender, in Vancouver. So they were farming at a great deal. They would have had to bring that down at that time from up in that valley, probably by wagon and horse, and then putting it on the train and getting it on the train to Vancouver. So, it wasn't an easy venture, but they maintained those businesses here. As most places in the province, as business dwindled here, they moved further. Quite a few people from here moved to Kamloops. Then there were many, many vegetable farms started there, for example. then I think the market was starting to be flooded, so then they moved out from that also. So there's a really big history of the Chinese people in this area. His dad came over. His name wasn't actually Chong. It was Lo, L-O-W, his first name, Big. Yeah. And then when they came, and they've had Chong Wa in the store, so everybody here started calling them Chongs. And so they just adopted that name. Yeah. The baby is Ron, and David just passed away a year ago, and Peter passed away maybe 5 years ago. And Beatrice passed away quite a long time ago of some illness. So this is one picture of the store that was over here in the laundry.
喺 Lytton 眾多嘅華人家庭入面，創氏家族嘅歷史特別長。佢哋嘅雜貨店從19世紀就開始營業，一直陪伴住當地社區超過100年。Ron 創作為家族嘅後代，親身見證住華人喺呢片土地上嘅奮鬥同埋轉變。
Well, of course, my father came because he was looking for his father, who was up here in the Lytton area. So that's why my father came to come up here. I think they left working at the ranch, and they decided that he could maybe make a living by running a general store, a grocery store, that type of thing. And mostly, I guess they mostly served the Chinese, or not the indigenous community here in the area. My father went out and various other businesses. He went off to open a hotel in Williams Lake, actually. He left that to be run by a partner. Came back to Lytton. They had a little old store, and I think I remember it was quite a old, dilapidated building. But I was actually born in the new building, which was the new store, when I was born in 1935. So in 1935, we became a little bit more Canadian, I guess. Canadianized, and we became known as Lytton Supplies.
Lorna 指當時好多嘅華人開始喺呢度種菜，從事農業，形成新嘅社區。後來由於市場供應過剩，呢啲嘅產業亦逐漸式微，就好似卑詩省好多嘅小鎮一樣。隨住本地經濟衰退，商機減少，唔少嘅華人家庭陸續離開 Lytton，轉往 Kamloops 發展。
It brings to mind my friend in high school. My best friend all these years was Chinese. Her dad came over, I don't know exactly what year, but her mom wasn't allowed to come till 1950. She was born in 52. And we've talked about this since, because she was asking me why I'm doing the museum. But she said her focus in all of her years, little prairie town with 2 Chinese families, was to pretend she wasn't Chinese. You know, she's young in high school. And so she was pushing away her culture. The reason I liked their family is I would go over there and I was interested in what her mom and dad were doing. Her dad ran a laundry. They had an old bachelor living in the laundry building that we took food to every day. And so their story is kind of the Chinese-Canadian story, right? And so I was young and naive, so I don't have all their background. But even with my friend, she was young too. That's why she was pushing away her Chinese heritage to just fit in with everybody. All students like to fit in with everybody, I suppose. But I think that's our role, to reawaken that. Reawaken how her family, what her dad went through in order to provide a living there. You know, it must have been very lonely in our little town when he was first there. So those are important things. So I did have one win over that though. So I went to the newspaper for our town and I researched everything, and I found out 1945 her dad actually advertised tailoring. Come in and get your new suit made. And then what was really surprising to her and me, in the paper in 1950 when her mom arrived, they had a whole community event welcoming the mom. So we have a businessman in town, he's running a laundry, we'll welcome his wife. To me that was surprising because I didn't actually realize that there would be that same welcoming for a Chinese family, but it was there. And so things like that need to be told too, Like they were appreciated in many communities. This little list, this is from somebody's diary. So commonly a railway worker made $1 a day. Non-Chinese made $2 a day. And then they had to buy many things just to survive while they were here. So in the end, after he pays everything he needs just to live to the railway, that would have been their stores, then he ended up with $42 at the end of the year. So pretty hard to be able to go back home. So they're held captive here, really. A living quarters dug into a bank closer to Clinton. But what happened? Winter shelters in 82, 83, CP said they don't need the people anymore. We don't need you to work anymore. And they abandoned them in Spence's Bridge, which is a half hour.
對唔少華裔社區嚟講，歷史唔只係過去，更係一種責任同埋提醒。作為推動政府公開道歉同埋歷史修復計劃嘅見證者，屈潔冰深知呢段歷史所承載嘅重量。
2013年首次獲委任為多元文化廳長就好榮幸啦。當時省長就叫我咧立即咧就上任第一日咧就要即刻去全省各地去進行公眾諮詢，咁我就走訪咗好多不同嘅地方，親身去聆聽好多先僑嘅後裔咧，同埋有啲當地居民咧就講佢哋關於當時華裔受歧視。咁最終咧喺第2年咧就2014年嘅5月咧，省長就代表全體83個省員喺省議會公開向華人社區道歉，向佢哋致歉，就係喺100幾年前當時嘅省政府係咁歧視性嘅，係對佢哋唔俾佢哋繼續留喺度啊，唔俾佢哋去大學讀書啊，唔俾佢哋去游泳池啊，同埋好多種種不公義嘅政策。咁道歉咗之後咧，當時我就同省長講，希望咧我哋繼續有一連串嘅傳承計劃，可以將呢個咁黑暗嘅歷史咧唔好去遺忘咗，因為我哋如果唔從歷史學取教訓，我哋會繼續重複我哋犯嘅錯誤嘅。
之後，屈潔冰成立咗華人歷史傳承委員會，推動住一系列嘅行動，包括檢視全省近2000條嘅法例，徹底廢除其中嘅19條仍然帶有歧視字眼嘅法案。佢亦都同教育部合作，將華人歷史納入中小學課程，亦撥款製作由皇家卑詩博物館開發嘅竹筍教材，俾老師有資源教導呢段嘅歷史。佢話：呢個唔單止係教育嘅改革，更係歷史嘅回升。而包括 Lytton 在內嘅15個地點，亦設立紀念碑，見證呢一段不容遺忘嘅歷史痕跡。
There's a lot of stories that have been told by, gosh, the Chinese were forced to pull the SCSI upstream on the Fraser through Hell's Gate, which seems impossible, but they put bolts into the wall there, which you could still see when we're on our rafts. And then they did put cables through them, and then the Chinese pulled on it, and they got the boats upstream. Mm-hmm. And so at first I used to react to that, saying, yeah, they made them do that. But then I had people come from China and said, yeah, what's the big deal? They do that on the Yangtze all the time.
從一個偶然嘅發現開始，羅娜決定將呢一段被遺忘嘅歷史建成一座嘅博物館。雖然佢手上幾乎冇任何嘅收藏品，但佢好快就得到意想不到嘅支持。
From following that sort of beginning state, I really had very few artifacts, had very little knowledge, really. And so when I opened in 2017, I had the collection from Al Dreyer, who had 180 pieces that he brought in from Lillooet, Lytton, this area, Ashcroft, that he'd collected since 1960. So that gave me sort of a basis for starting the museum. And then about a year later, Reg Beck, who collected 800 pieces from Quesnel, Barkerville, Ashcroft, and some from the lower mainland, he sold me his collection. That just rounded it out because it was pretty much every piece I would need to tell the story the way it is. His collection also had a reputation in many of the universities, University of Idaho, for example, where they already were aware of his collection. So I was very fortunate in getting that. So going along in the museum, that we welcome people, I guess, first from 2017 until June of the fire in 21.
唔喺重要嘅文獻同埋文物遭到燒毀嘅情況之下，Lytton華人嘅歷史博物館係點樣由零開始，再次講出呢一段被遺忘嘅歷史呢？ 下一節翻嚟，我哋將會探討博物館背後嘅人物故事，見證一位非華裔館主點樣同整個社區一齊尋找記憶。歡迎翻嚟節目時間。好多移民家庭選擇喺Lytton定居，為生計之餘亦都係想喺該處落地生根。但係突如其來嘅火災就為呢一個社區嘅集體意志帶嚟咗挑戰。咁重建嘅步伐應該點樣起步呢？
So after the fire, we weren't allowed down into town for a long time. And we weren't allowed to our business out on the highway either. The town burned down in 23 minutes, I believe, and it reached Kamshin, our family business, in 40 minutes. There was no time to do anything. And so when we weren't allowed to come and see what happened, but I think we'd already knew everything was gone. And it was such a windy day and such a hot fire, we knew there'd be nothing left at all. So the first time I was allowed to come in here looking for artifacts was in October, I've forgotten the date. So this is how most of the pieces came out, like with a lot of melted glass from the shelves on them. And that's only glass bottles I found, and there was nothing else. That's what I came back to in October. That's basically how it looked, and I just knew, you know, it's beyond getting anything. But I was happy to get these few things too. There were two reasons I decided to go with the museum. One was I didn't want to be one of the businesses that left Lytton, like abandoned the town. Even though it doesn't employ many people, doesn't have a huge income, it does bring people to the community. So that was one reason. But the second reason, I still felt passionate about telling the story. Like, that's why I got into this museum, to tell that story, so I wanted to continue with that. And once I decided to rebuild, and the funding was coming in, then so many people contacted me, even some other museums, saying, if you're starting the museum again, we'll donate some of our family pieces to you. And so they are not from the Lytton area, most of these pieces in the museum, but they're very same as what I had before, because every Chinese railway camp, every mining camp imported the same things during the same era from China. So that's why all of these things that have been given to me still work in this. Bigger museums would say if it wasn't from the Lytton area, you know, don't take it, but of course we have nothing from the Lytton area now. So this works, it still tells a story, and that's the important part here.
呢段歷史嘅重建唔只係社區嘅努力，亦引起咗省級層面嘅關注。
當時以為個歷史就咁樣淹沒咗，但係 Lorna 仍然不離不棄，仍然係堅忍不拔咁樣同整個社區佢哋捐錢俾佢，到今日咧就好易重建啦。所以其實重建環博物館唔單止係個建築物，係俾我哋感覺到作為我哋係 BC 省民，我哋最緊要有堅忍不朽嘅精神咧，我哋係可以將個歷史繼續延續嘅，所以我覺得係非常之有意義咯。
但從理想到現實，重建嘅路從來都唔平坦。對 Lorna 嚟講，要重新起嘅唔單止係建築物本身，仲要穿越層層嘅制度同埋等待。
There's a whole process of things that happened with the whole village there, which were very slow, not consistent between, they tell you one thing one day, next day something changed. I'm not blaming our village council though for that. That was outside groups that came in that were telling us what we needed to do. So that was slow and frustrating. The building process itself was more difficult than my first build. In the first build, sort of bureaucratic papers I needed were about ½ inch thick, and probably, I think it was $2,600 I had to pay to get these things done, requirements for the building. The second time around was about a 6-inch stack and $25,000 just to get to where you could put the shovel in the ground. So there was quite a change.
喺一堆堆嘅文物入面，仲有一啲承載住個人記憶同埋情感。Lorna 就話：佢最珍惜嘅一件展品係一條嚟自百年家族嘅嬰兒頭巾。
I always said before the fire, I always said the most important artifact I had here was from Peter Chong. So Peter, you know, his family here 100 years. He was 92. He gave me his baby headband. So, you know, they make a really nice little headband when they're a month old. and then they have a celebration that the baby's a month old. So that was so important to him because he's 92. That means his mom saved it all those years and then he saved it. And so it was sitting in the display case over there. And always that was my most important one because it meant something to him and meant something to his mom. So that's gone now, but I do have a reasonable picture of that or photo of that. So I probably will put that in with a bit of a story about him. So for sure that was the one I was attached to before. I don't have one right now that is just so wonderful.
但喺度重建嘅唔止係博物館，仲有整個小鎮嘅生機。
And I worry about those businesses because either they can't afford to come back or they don't have the funds to come back or maybe they just give up by now. It's 4 years. They've been making a life somewhere else for 4 years. So I think that's a challenge for Lytton. Every time there's one little new construction site started, we're all cheered up and we think, okay, it's going to survive.
I didn't think it would ever recover because we waited quite a few years, but now I'm getting a little bit more enthused as I see Lytton starting to show signs of rebuilding, and I like that, and I hope to see it do well.
Lytton will survive. It'll be a lot different than it was. It was an older community. I think it'll have to change to be a younger community with more services, more young people.
重建嘅唔止係建築，更係一個地方嘅身份同埋精神。對好多人嚟講，呢場災後重生係一場對記憶嘅堅守。
山火可以將成個鎮滅掉，可以將環博物歷史博物館滅掉，但係山火唔可以滅掉我哋人性嘅堅忍不拔嘅精神。由呢件手去睇到咧，我覺得呢個館主同埋 Lytton 嘅居民同埋好多華裔嗰啲捐款嘅人士，因為今次佢係好多人籌款一齊嚟興建嘅，咁所以我覺得咧，呢個嘅意義好大。等我哋知道咧，只要我哋係不屈不撓咧，我哋任何嘢都可以成功嘅。而且我哋一定要將我哋嘅歷史咧繼續傳承下去，因為正如我頭先講啦，如果我哋唔喺歷史中係學習咧，我哋永遠重複歷史嘅錯誤，我哋亦都唔可以向前走嘅。
About the fire itself, the fire becomes part of this story in this building. But I just did one little display area about the fire, saying this is part of it. But I didn't want that to become at all the focus. I want the museum to talk about the accomplishments of Chinese people. Likewise, a lot of places get, I think, stuck in talking about what was done wrong for the Chinese. And I understand that's very important. But for me, that's the dialogue that people are hearing now. But I think that's part of what they need to hear. But they need to hear, no, look at how they persevered. Look at all the things they did. I think that's the important part of the story.
對 Ron 嚟講，呢場火災幾乎中斷咗佢對 Lytton 嘅想像，但如今面對住緩慢嘅重建，佢亦重新燃起一絲嘅希望。
Seeing them flattened to the ground by fire, and having it being very slow to be rebuilt, I kind of felt that was the end of Lytton. I didn't think it would ever be able to rebound. But I think now there's a little hope, and I hope for the people here that there will be a vibrant town come out of the ashes.
經歷火災同埋重建後，Lorna 仍然相信呢座博物館存在嘅意義，唔只係保存記憶，更係啟發大家重新思考自己同埋歷史嘅連結。
So in the town of Lytton's very small, so people will come in here and they'll bring their relatives when they're visiting or something, right? So all those people were coming here, and even if they just stop in here on their way to Barkerville where there's a huge Chinese presence, but even if they're just doing those 2 stops and then go home and think about it and start looking at their own history and bringing out more history, that I think is our role. That's what we're here for, is to get people interested in researching on their own and finding out of their own history.
好啦，今集嘅節目時間就差唔多啦。咁如果觀眾對我哋嘅節目有啲乜嘢意見嘅話，係好歡迎大家以電郵嘅方式同我哋聯絡㗎。我哋嘅電郵地址係mag26@fairchildtv.com。 如果觀眾想上網重溫今集嘅節目，亦都可以上去我哋嘅網站3w.fairchildtv.com 點擊節目重溫一欄就可以睇得翻㗎啦。咁從下個星期開始，我哋會1連8個星期為大家播出26分鐘見證實錄精華回顧，同大家重溫個別嘅精彩報導。再見。